Hi, and welcome to a most unusual rent party. Thanks for watching. I'm Carol Golden, Chair of Housing Initiatives of Princeton. As many of you know, during normal times, HIP is committed to helping Princeton be a diverse and inclusive community by providing transitional housing with wraparound services, as well as emergency rental assistance for families who experience a setback, like a lost job or an illness, that makes them unable to pay their rent. Now, during this unprecedented pandemic, the accompanying economic fallout that's hitting our most vulnerable neighbors the worst, and the frightening failure of government to address these crises, HIP is finding that our mission is even more crucial than ever. All of the families living in HIP housing have been impacted by these crises. They've lost jobs, they've had hours cut, and they're experiencing remote learning with their kids at home. HIP has stepped up to forgive rents and provide support that is even beyond our normal wraparound services, just to keep these hardworking and hard-hit families safe in their homes. And then there are the families that don't have HIP for a landlord. As you might have heard, there is a moratorium on evictions in New Jersey, as well as a CDC-ordered moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent. This does not mean that the rent is not due. It doesn't even mean that landlords can't file for eviction, because they can, and they are. But as I said, the rent is still due, and so many of our neighbors are still unemployed or underemployed and really unable to pay it. Let's face it, this thing is going on much longer than we thought it was going to be back in the spring. Our supporters like you have generously contributed, but the need for help, like the virus, isn't going away. HIP is committed to continue for as long as we can to help these hardworking families pay their rent so they can stay safely in their homes while we all weather this crisis together. So, unfortunately, we can't get together for a rent party, but we are providing these videos that we hope will encourage you to support our mission as you listen to some poetry, some readings, some beautiful jazz music, and are inspired to remember the original Harlem rent parties that were needed back in the early part of the 20th century. And it's sad that they're still needed today. So right now, I'd love you to listen to my friend, Professor Wallace Best, Professor of African American Studies and Director of the Gender and Sexuality Studies program at Princeton University. I know you're going to enjoy his readings, and I'm so grateful to him for contributing to these videos. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Wallace Best, and I'm honored to speak to you on behalf of Housing Initiatives of Princeton. I'm drawn to the important work of HIP because it resonates with me on both a professional level and on a personal level. I grew up in a working class family in Washington, D.C., with parents who worked very hard to take care of my siblings and me, but they struggled to do that. And simply paying the rent was never simple. Indeed, paying the rent was the most difficult aspect of our life as a family, and we had no one to help us. So as a child, I knew what it felt like to be insecure with regard to housing, as many fine individuals and families in the Princeton area still do. Fortunately, HIP is there with the wonderful assistance I so wish my family had had. But the work of HIP also resonates with me on a professional level. I'm a historian who's written quite a lot about religion in American cities, but my latest book is about a poet, the poet Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes loved cities. He especially loved New York City's Harlem neighborhood where he lived. He loved Harlem and everything that went on there, including the many rent parties that were extremely popular in the 1920s throughout the 1940s. Now, Rent parties served two extremely important functions. The first function was to provide the hard-working residents of Harlem a good time on a Friday or a Saturday night. Second, and most importantly, they were to raise enough money for a struggling individual or a struggling family to pay the rent. Rents were extremely high in Harlem throughout this time, and paying the rent was most often difficult. So, hosting a party with good food, with good drink, with good music, usually jazz music, often saved the day and often saved an individual or a family from certain eviction. The phenomenon of rent parties so fascinated Hughes that he began collecting rent party announcements in the 1920s, and now that collection is one of the largest in the country, held at the Beinecke Library at Yale University, where Hughes's papers are held. Hughes also wrote poetry about rent, the need to pay it, the difficulty of paying it, and the hope that one day paying the rent would not be so difficult. So what I would like to do is to read two little poems written by Hughes that talk about life in Harlem and about paying the rent. The first little poem is written in the voice of a fictional character Hughes created in the 1940s named Madam Alberta K. Johnson. The poem is called Madam and the Rent Man. The rent man knocked. He said, "Howdy do." I said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "You know your rent is due." I said, "Listen, before I'd pay, I'd go to Hades and rot away. The sink is broke, the water don't run, and you ain't done a thing you promised to have done. Back windows cracked, kitchen floor squeaks, there's rats in the cellar, and the attic leaks." He said, "Madam, it's not up to me. I'm just the agent, don't you see?" I said, "Naturally, you pass the buck. If it's money you want, you're out of luck." He said, "Madam, I ain't pleased." I said, "Neither am I." So we agrees. The second little poem is little indeed. It's called Little Lyric of Great Importance, and it's simply a rent prayer. I wish the rent was heaven sent. Sending you all my best wishes, and thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed Professor Bessa's look into the original rent parties and his reading of the Langston Hughes poems. I am struck by the straightforward simplicity of the pleas presented by protagonists in these masterful works. So too are the blunt cries for help, particularly in the rental assistance realm of the work HIP performs, as clients seek any means at their disposal for thwarting threats to housing security ignited by financial dilemmas created during this current pandemic. I'm Ira Lackey, an HIP board member, and I've been affiliated with HIP's impactful work in varying capacities for the past 15 years. I've watched our growth from housing 2 families in a home owned by Trinity Church on Mercer Street to growth through partnerships, funding help for nearly 100 families just this past year alone in rental assistance, in addition to the 5 homes we own or manage. Thank you for your vital support.